Welcome to the Battle Buddy Podcast with Keith McKeever.
Welcome back to another episode of the Battle Buddy Podcast. I am joined by a military spouse today. So, Britt, you have the honor and distinction of being the first military spouse to be on the Battle Buddy Podcast, and we are going to talk about military spouse issues. Your husband had recently done a deployment. We're going to talk about some of those things, resiliency, power of community, and some other things like that. So welcome to the podcast. So go ahead and share some of your story, where you're raised, what you've done, what you guys are doing, where you guys are stationed at, whatever you want to tell.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I'm so honored to be the first mil spouse to join you. I was actually also a military brat. And my dad was in the Coast Guard when I was little. He joined when I was 2. So he got to miss potty training and 2-year-old tantrums and all that. I'm sure
Lucky
he's thankful. But I was born in Vermont and raised in Vermont most of my life. But while we were in the Coast Guard, we moved from Texas to Washington State a couple places, and then finally back home. During that time, I'm the oldest of 4 kids. And so we had my sister, we adopted my brother while my dad was active duty, which is pretty cool. And then he moved us 3 back home to Vermont, where we grew to 4 kids and a family of 6. And a couple divorces later, through my mom's side of the family and all that, I came out here to Tucson to chase my dream to be a corporate ladder climbing hearing aid specialist, and realized rather quickly that that's not really the direction I wanted to go, and choosing entrepreneurship. Through that journey, I found Nick, who is my service member and my spouse. Nick is active duty Air Force. And so he went through a deployment last year that was very traumatic for me. He left a month after we were married. And through that and reintegration and struggling with his borderline PTSD and my anxiety from that experience, coupled with just reintegrating back, living together again, led me to actually create my business and my podcast. So, I don't know where I would be without the military. I wouldn't have a brother. I wouldn't have the worldly experience that I did have growing up. I wouldn't have my husband or my business. I don't even know.
I feel the same way just about my service. I mean, I didn't grow up around military, but I feel very strongly about I am today who I am because of the things that happened when I served, what I did, the people I met, the things I experienced, things I learned, all that stuff. Like, you reflect and you realize, wow, a lot of the things I am is because of that. Very, very shaped by that in one way, shape or another. So a lot of similarities there. But Vermont, of all places, that has to be interesting. I must admit, I've never been to Vermont. Is there a lot of towns you just blinking right through, or is you just blinking right through the state? I mean,
yeah, Vermont is a very teeny tiny, sweet part of the country. I didn't realize it growing up, but when I came out here to Arizona, we're stationed at Davis-Monthan in Tucson, and you get acclimated to all these spices and, Mexican food and like all this rich culture. And then you go back home to Vermont and it's maple syrup, and it's, my dad would throw maple syrup on anything, boiled carrots, chicken. It didn't matter. Like, there's a reason it's one of the biggest populations of diabetes in the country. It's nothing but sweetness and fall and candy and, but it's very beautiful. So if you haven't gone to Vermont, you got to go in like the second week of October, because that's when all the leaves are changing and it's just beautiful.
I bet that would be. And right before you said maple syrup, I was thinking it. as you went on spices, I was like, what is there up there? I'm like, maple syrup. I was like, You must put maple syrup on everything.
Everything.
I don't know if I was a terrible stereotype maybe, but the thing with stereotypes is a lot of times they're true. So
Yeah. Yeah. Growing up, we could tell the difference between Vermont maple syrup and Canadian maple syrup. And I mean, you could do a taste test with our eyes closed and we could tell the difference.
That's like the old Pepsi and Coke challenge.
Yeah.
So, okay, this is off topic, but boy, am I fascinated by this. How can you tell the difference between Canadian and Vermont maple syrup?
There's just a taste difference. Like Vermont maple syrup is just so like not necessarily thick, but it just tastes more rich. Like it's got more like Canadian maple syrup almost tastes kind of watery. Um, and so, I mean, when we were really little, we could tell the difference between New Hampshire and Vermont. And I'm pretty sure that was total BS. But yeah, we're, as much as you are like gung ho for the Broncos, we were just that strong. We felt that just that strongly about maple syrup.
Wow. You have officially blown my mind today.
We're
I
6 minutes
probably
in.
don't need to. I'm trying to be healthy as possible, but I kind of want to buy multiple types of syrup and test this myself now.
Well, so now that we live out here in Arizona, my family always sends us maple syrup for Christmas. So we always get maple syrup. And what's interesting is that we have collected a collection of maple syrups because you've got bacon maple syrup, whiskey bourbon maple syrup, which is just maple syrup aged in whiskey barrels. You've got elderberry maple syrup, honey maple syrup. I mean, it's endless. So if you start going down that road, best be careful.
Now, I was just thinking original. Just find one from Canada, one from Vermont, and taste them. But wow,
You could do
yeah, I
that
never
too.
thought about that. It's like barbecue sauces. There's a million different combinations. But
Yep, exactly.
back to the story here. So your husband went on was that his first deployment?
It was his third
It was his
deployment, but
third. Okay.
my first
Okay.
deployment since I can remember. I mean, my dad went on a couple as Coast Guard, but nothing that I remembered growing up.
Okay. So how did you prepare? I mean, you only had a month from the time you got married to the time he left.
Yeah.
How much preparation did you do, and what you could prepare for? How did you actually prepare for that?
That's a great question. So hindsight is 2020. So looking back, I'm like, man, girl, you had no idea. You didn't do anything. But in the moment, I was thinking, well, I've done long distance relationships before. I'm not new to that. When I moved out here, I was dating somebody for 2 years. We moved out here. We dated long distance for another year. And so I was like this is a piece of cake. Like if I've done this before, I can do it again. Like he's just going to Afghanistan. Like, no big deal, right? But a deployment is so much different than quote unquote just a long distance relationship. There's a lot more to it, and a lot more complications. And then, where he was going was not safe. And he wasn't giving me all the information to try to make sure I wasn't worrying back home. And then I friended someone who was also going through this with her spouse overseas. And she was telling me all this stuff. And I was like, what do you mean? What do you mean rockets are, wait, what? Like, what's going on? And then, of course, I would message him and wait for a response 12 hours later, like, oh, yeah, we get rocketed every once in a while. Like, no big deal. But to me, that's not a big deal. So as far as preparation going into it, I had no idea. And so I was relying on blog posts and Pinterest and all the other places we go to. And we're like, how do we do this? And relying on the past experience I had, which was not at all what it was going to be like at all.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's one thing to be separated by a long distance, and I've never been in a long distance relationship, but they have their job, they're doing their thing. A little bit of a sense of relative safety. You're just going about your daily life, doing your thing, right? You just have this relationship long distance, but there's a difference between that and somebody who goes overseas to work. I don't know. You pick a country, right? When they just go and they're doing a normal civilian type job over there, you're still going to think about them. You're still going to have some of those challenges. But when you somebody going to a war zone where communication is difficult, or God forbid something happens to somebody and they cut that communication off, I know that was difficult for me. I was single both times I deployed, but I would call home and talk to my mom and my stepdad every now and then. My stepdad's a Vietnam vet, but my mom would freak out. There was times where I was on the phone with her when we had rockets and mortars coming in, and I would just sit down on the floor and have the phone in my hand and say, "Hey, I just want to let you know there's some stuff going on, and the phone may just go out, but I want you to know I'm probably fine." If it does.
Yeah.
Like, it's crazy to have to like forewarn your loved ones back home. Like, if the phone goes out, I may or may not be alive, but we're being shot at like right now. I mean, there was times that she heard the explosions in the background and the sirens going off, and it's weird.
Yeah.
I can imagine from the spouse perspective. That's why I was so excited about this conversation, because this podcast is for the military community, and a lot of what I've talked about is entrepreneurship and stuff for veterans, a little bit for the service members, but this one really is for the spouses. But I got to thinking, honestly, earlier today, this is good for the military members too, because they need to realize some insight into both sides of things. So how did you handle his actual deployment and then the reintegration?
Yeah. So while he was deployed, so we got married in June. He left in July. And so at first I was like, all right, I just gotta do what I gotta do, right? Like, this is just what you do as a military spouse. You just do it. There's no preparation. There's no contract that you quote unquote sign up for or anything like that. You just do it. And so I remember dropping him off, and I was crying and sad and whatever. And then a couple hours later, I get a call from someone random. And of course, I'm like, well, he hasn't even like left, right? Like, he's halfway to Spain or wherever he's going. Like, who's calling me? And I didn't answer. And I got a voicemail that's like, just so you know, their plane hit a bird and they're landing, but they have to burn fuel first. So they're just circling above Tucson right now. You're going to have to come pick him up and drop him off again tomorrow.
Oh,
And I
geez.
was like, what? Like, you haven't even left yet and you're already in danger. Like, what is happening? And so I picked him up, brought him home, brought him back the next day. No tears this time. I was like, all right, just don't hit a bird. Like, that's all I'm asking, right? So he goes, and I don't hear from him for a couple days, which is pretty typical. But for someone who doesn't know that that's going to happen, I was like, oh gosh, like, did they hit another bird, like overseas? Like, what is happening? Like, I don't know anything, and I can't know anything.
Right, because
Like,
if he was just taking a trip from where you're at to, I don't know, London, you would expect him to call you as soon as he lands or gets in the hotel room. But
right.
that's definitely not the case, because that member has to get off the plane, get their gear, go wherever they're doing, right? It takes a while to get to a phone. And then you got X amount of guys and ladies out there fighting for the 5 phones that are available. That complicates things too.
Yeah, absolutely. And, if he was just flying to London, I could check a flight number and just make sure that it landed, right? Like, I could just check. But I dropped him off not knowing, he didn't even know where he was going, how long it was going to take to get there. And then it ended up that he went to a certain location, still undisclosed. And then a day later, they had to get back on another plane and go somewhere else for a day, and then get back on that plane. And then they finally landed in Afghanistan. And then, of course, it's getting set up and getting the Wi-Fi password. And it's, whatever else he needs to do in order to use his cell phone, or use the 5 phones that are there to just say, yeah, I made it, can't talk, but will soon. And then a quick hang up. So the first couple days were pretty hard just because I was nervous about him arriving. I just wanted to make sure he got there safe. And I wasn't even thinking about the dangers that would happen while he was there, because in my head, I was like, well, what he does isn't like, he's not going to be frontlining any sort of, anything. So it doesn't matter. Like, he's going to be safe. He's going to be in a building, and, he'll probably wear a suit and tie to work. Like, that was my mentality, right? Like, okay, he's there, but it's not going to be dangerous. the first 2 months of that deployment were really rough, and I was just missing my person. There were things going on in my corporate job that I wasn't very happy about, and I just wanted somebody to talk to. But because we'd been married so quick, I hadn't engrossed or accepted the military community around me. And so my 3 civilian friends didn't understand deployment. They didn't understand why he, quote unquote, chose to leave or any of that, or why he wouldn't be home for Christmas and how rude of him. And so,
Wow, they really thought that?
oh yeah, yeah. When the holidays came, it was like, oh yeah, Nick's not going to be here for a couple more months. And they were like, well, why can't he just come home? Like, just PTO, right? Like, just take the day off. And I'm like, that's not how that works at all.
Wow.
Yeah. And I've actually had conversations with spouses whose family members have died. And then family members are like, how rude of him for not coming home from a deployment to attend the funeral. And it's that kind of thing that we have to deal with because we're the ones getting asked all the questions from all of the family members, right? Like his mom was like, when's she coming home? Or when is he going to fly in? And I'm like, I don't know. When did he get there? I don't know. And even if I did know, I don't even think I can tell you. So that was really difficult, but I did find a deployment buddy, and I highly encourage anybody listening to either find a deployment buddy, or if your wife is going to be home or your husband's going to be home, have them find somebody, even if it's somebody. What happened for us is someone who had previously babysat our dogs. His girlfriend messaged me and was like, hey, I babysat your dogs once. Let's be friends. And that really saved me from getting into true depression, which I think is exactly where I was heading if I wasn't careful.
I think it'd be easy for a lot of people to just sit at home and just worried all day, every day, just thinking about all these things that just could happen, and to hit that downward spiral really quick. I think it can happen really, really quick. You got to find something to do. Now you got plenty to do, right? I mean, because your service member's gone, so all the chores he was doing at the house are now yours. But there's all those other things, that doesn't take up a ton of time.
Yeah.
Outside of your job and doing those chores, you still have a certain number of time in the day where, if you're not keeping yourself engaged and thinking about something positive, you could, hit that wall pretty quick.
Yeah. So Effie and I became best friends. And so we almost spent every single day together, just like she became my person for deployment. And so there would be a blackout. We had quite a few of them. We had a suicide bomber bomb the gate and kill a couple members at the gate of the base he was at. And so when you wake up and you don't have the text that should be there, that there's a blackout, the first thing you do as a spouse is, and it's the one thing you shouldn't do, but is go to Google and you're like, died Afghanistan, and you just like put it into the search bar, and you just hope that the media knows something that you don't. And so, when you hear like gate, okay, well, great. I know his job isn't at the gate, so I know he's safe. Or paratrooper. Okay, great. Which also happened while he was deployed. Okay, great. I know that he's not a paratrooper, so I know that he's safe. And so as awful as it was, you just get stuck in this died Afghanistan Google search, and you're just searching it all the time to make sure that the reason he hasn't texted isn't because he's one of those people, which unfortunately almost became a reality, but fortunately did not.
Yeah, very fortunately. That's just a lot of highs and lows to go up and down constantly. There's actually a lot of similarities even for the service member of those highs and lows, because they're in the same way. Like, all they want to do is get a message back to you saying, I'm fine.
Yeah.
Because that's the unfortunate reality, really, this last 20 years of war is the media and the ability to communicate. It's I'm sure it's a little different now. When I was in, it was phone calls. It wasn't video chats. That definitely wasn't a thing, but it was send an email out every now and then or make a phone call.
Yeah.
But I don't know. it's bad that the media can have so much information so quick.
Yeah.
And that's probably something that obviously they want to get the story out. That's what they do, is share stories. But
Right.
at the end of the day, I don't know if there's ever any thought about what that does to the people back home.
Yeah. And what's
Especially when he deployed, because this was just a couple years, not too long ago, we didn't have that many troops deployed. So you
yeah.
hear something like that, that it's a numbers game. When I was deployed, my first deployment was during the troop surge in '07. I mean, we had more troops in both countries than at any other time before that. So you hear something happening, which happened more frequently too, but I know as of just a couple months ago, there's only like 2,500 troops in Afghanistan. That's not a lot when something happens.
Yeah. 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 So, and then of course you've got this battle as well. Like while you're thankful that it wasn't you, you know that someone else is getting the knock on the door, and, somebody else is typing into the Google search "died Afghanistan" and seeing a paratrooper and going, "Oh my goodness, is that my husband or my wife?" And so it can be very scary, but you also feel guilty when you feel relieved that it's not them, which can be an internal battle that you just kind of have to get through. It's not something that anybody prepares you for. And then, of course, towards the end of his deployment, I'm sitting there, or not sitting there, I'm actually in boxing class, and I'm in the ring, and I'm, going through the motions of class and all that. And thank goodness I had my Apple Watch on. I normally don't wear it for boxing because I don't want it to get damaged. But during deployment, any communication, I'm leaving the class if I get a text or a call.
Of
Like
course.
boxing class, I can do that again next week. And I just get a message on my watch that says, "Babe, I've been told to give my last goodbyes just in case things aren't looking good real quick." And it's that kind of message. Like, there was no blackout yet. Like, nothing bad had happened yet. I wasn't typing into Google anything. And just getting a message like, "I've been told I'm probably going to die," is just overwhelming. And that day, which was actually January of last year, I still remember the day. I still remember how I felt in the ring. And I was literally just like, I got to go. I was so numb. I just left. Like, this poor girl in the ring next to me, was
She's like,
like,
what
"What?
happened?
Like, what? Like, did I hurt you or something?" But, just getting that kind of a message, a text message, because you can't call. So just getting a message like, "Babe, this is my last goodbye. I hope you, find somebody new. I hope you fall in love again. This is where the power of attorney is that I had you sign. This is what you're going to have to do." Like, I mean, no one prepared me. There was no way I could prepare to say my final goodbyes to my husband. And it was very traumatic.
That's totally understandable,
Yeah.
especially when you're just going about your daily life and you got the boxing gloves on and you're doing your thing, trying to get a little healthier and maybe beat somebody up, allow some of that frustration from the deployment, from him being gone. But yeah, to get a
Yeah.
message like that would be a tough one.
Yeah. So basically what happened is all the sirens started going off, and he worked nights. So he was awake at this point in time. And all of a sudden, just everything lit up red. That's the only way he could describe it. Like, every screen, the movie theater, everything just lit up bright red. And they were waking everybody up, telling them, "We're going to get attacked. And it's happening tonight. We've saw on the radar, all of the rockets are coming our way. Like, it's set. Like, there is no end game here. Like, this is going to happen." And so I found out after deployment that they were hiding love letters around base just in case something was still standing, that their letter might make it home. And I just remember in that moment calling my dad just crying. I'm driving home from boxing class and I'm like, I don't even know how to respond to my husband. Like, what do you say in your last goodbyes? Like, what do you say before somebody dies? And I still don't know the answer to that.
I don't know. That's a darn good question.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, do you just simply reply with "I love you" or "I love you"? I'll see you when you get back. Like, do you try and give him some hope? I mean, obviously, he had much more important things to try and think about. I mean,
Right.
keeping himself in the moment, protecting the guys next to him. But that's what I
Yeah.
mean by that. But
Yeah.
I don't know. That's definitely a new one. Receiving a text, because that definitely wasn't a thing when I was in.
Yeah.
That could have definitely gotten interesting. Like I said, neither was FaceTime really. Skype was kind of a big thing. I don't know where that went, but
I forgot about Skype. Yeah.
at least he didn't video chat you in that moment. That could have been very nerve wracking. But
Yeah.
that being in that kind of situation though, that would be insane. You know, I know when I was deployed, we had situations like that where we had a plan when something crazy and catastrophic was going to happen. We ran some exercises, but nothing ever got to the point where this looks like it's really imminent.
Yeah.
But I had one incident where there was a V-bid that was supposedly headed towards our gate, and I was in one of the Humvees out there to intercept it. We were told to light up the engine block if we saw headlights.
Yeah.
Thankfully for us, we never did. We sat out there for a long time, and whatever aircraft was tracking it had taken care of the problem before it got to us. Thank goodness. But that's
Wow.
close. I've been to a situation like that where you're just facing this like, hey, this is a real reality. Like, there is a threat coming towards you, because I hate to say it, you know, rockets and mortars are one of those things where, at least in my situation in Iraq anyway, it was kind of set it and forget it. They'd set it, launch it off. Yeah, they're kind of aiming wherever it hits, it hits. By the time my second deployment came around, it was no big deal. Like I said, I'd sit on the floor talking to my mom on the phone and be like, yeah, we're just getting shot at again. No big deal, you know?
Yeah.
Like, you shrug it off. But if you have something major like that, that'd be a tough one to deal with. So,
Yeah.
but the good news is he made it home.
He did.
So how was that? How was that reintegration process after he got back?
Yeah, it was easy for the first day because you're on this high of he's home and I get to hold him, and finding him in the crowd and holding up the sign and being really excited. It's like this big whirlwind of emotions, but mostly, again, you're just numb, but in a happy way. And then you get home and the mini honeymoon phase of reintegration kind of wears off. And he's used to a set schedule. He's used to having to wake up at a certain time. He's used to 6 to 7 hour work days. And he's used to that strict have to be, have to go, have to do. And I had taken off a week of vacation. I was going to spend it with my husband. We were going to chill. We were going to go on vacation, just hang out. Like, we were just going to spend time together. And I didn't realize it round one. If we ever go through another deployment, I know for sure that I will not take off PTO because he really needed that time to just kind of be. He was so high strung for 7.5 months that he couldn't come undone very easily. And so him chilling on the couch for a month, he earned it. And I should have given him that grace and that time. And I didn't, because I was just so excited to have my person back that I just wanted to be together, you know? And everybody talks about, the deployment baby that comes after deployment, but we didn't even want to be in the same room as each other. I mean, we were just upset all the time at each other because he wasn't following the routine I had, and he didn't understand what was going on. And I changed the furniture, changed the decor, whatever. And I was like, yeah, but I did that like 5 months ago. Like, it's like normal for me. But he came home to a different home, different atmosphere, different plan. And he really needed that time to just settle out.
Oh, absolutely. I've said for a long time, and I don't know how much training he did, but I was security forces in the Air Force. So both deployments, I think the pre-deployment training was like 2 weeks or so, 2 or 3 weeks. I've said for a long time, I hate how the military would bring people back from deployment and give them you come back, you in process for that second or third day, right? You come back, you in process the unit, you turn in your paperwork, whatever, but then they give you like 2 weeks off. I think personally, and it would suck for the spouse and the kids, but I think in the long run, it would make more sense. And I'm curious what your opinion is on this.
Yeah.
If they would take them to another location before they come home and allow them as a group of guys and gals to decompress in a safer environment, maybe even inside the United States, but someplace where they can come back, they can set their gear down, and they can slowly unwind over a month period. Maybe do some training. Like I did detainee operations, and that was something that was not a primary job of security forces. It was something that we easily adapted to, but but if you came back and they said, okay, well, we're just going to go over, come to some base, maybe if it's another air base, right? And you set up shop, you stay in some tents, you stay in the hotel, whatever, and you train back on your regular job. You ease yourself back in somehow. I don't know what that looks like, but 2 or 3 weeks, and then you come home to the family.
Yeah. But
if you're in the States, you have then phone calls, text messages, FaceTime. You're not as many time zones away. I just think that just makes it makes too much sense. Like I said, it would suck for the family that has to wait an extra 2 or 3 weeks, maybe a month, whatever the case may be. But it gives that member a chance to decompress and maybe take some classes where they can learn, hey, look, you're going to come back into this. And, for Nick's sake, when you get home, Britt's going to have her own schedule, right? She's cooking dinner when she cooks dinner. She's cooking what she wants to cook for dinner. She's taking the garbage out when she's taking the garbage out. Like, you are going to have to adapt to her just as much as she's going to have to adapt to you. And I think like it's something everybody knows, but like it needs to be pounded in their head. Yeah. So that's my 2 cents on that.
It's interesting that you say that because I think the spouses need something like that too, to be honest. I was, again, brand new spouse. I knew I had a key spouse who would fill me in. She would send out a text to everybody in our unit at our base who had deployed. And it was just, is everybody good? Thumbs up emoji. Okay, great. And that was it. And so for a while I was like, yeah, I got to be independent. I got to know what I'm doing. I can't be dependent on this woman who's also experiencing a deployment. Doesn't matter how many times she's done it. Deployment isn't easy, no matter what number of deployments you're on. And so, I was stuck in this. I have to show that I'm not a dependa, right? I don't need anybody. I'm this independent woman. And I got stuck in that headspace because that was the culture. I mean, that's what is ingrained in you. Either you're a dependa and you got to rely on everybody for everything, or you got to be this super independent. I can do everything on my own. When in actuality, the reality is somewhere in the middle. And I think it's important for military spouses to recognize that sometimes you need to be dependent on people and sometimes you need to be independent, and it's okay to be both. But when he came home, a week before he came home or before he left, we were all shuffled into this little room, and it was our kind of debrief of deployment. This is the plan. And it was a PowerPoint slide of about 10 slides that was well, if you get paid extra, make sure you call this number. And if you don't get paid at all, call the same number. And remember when they come home that it's going to be difficult. And it was kind of like, are we just here for the free pizza? I'm confused. This isn't helping me out at all.
Remember you told me that story before.
Yeah.
So did you ever have to call the number? Did anybody at finance actually pick up?
We didn't have to call. So I wouldn't know, but I have seen on spouse pages that it is not good.
I may have been out for 10 years, but I still got to take my shots at finance.
I don't blame you at all.
Yeah.
No.
They
Yeah.
deserve it.
Yeah. So, from a military spouse perspective, it would almost be easier to have what you're talking about, because at least now when they're coming home. When they're in Afghanistan and it's pushback a week, well, we don't know if we're replacing this team or the next team or whatever. You just don't know when they're coming home. But if okay, it's been pushed back 3 times, but now they're in Colorado debriefing, and it's going to be a 3-week process. And I know for those 3 weeks as a military spouse on my base, I have a support group that meets on Wednesday nights at 6 p.m. for an hour. And we just talk about what to expect with seasoned spouses or with other people who have been through this, with active duty who have recently returned from a deployment, so that they can talk about their experiences. Because women and military spouses are ingrained differently than the male brain is, right? I fully believe this, and I fully believe that military spouses, we thrive in community. And so if we didn't necessarily have like a training, but if we just sat down in a circle and we just talked, like our husbands are coming home in 14 days, how exciting. We're all on the same countdown and we can all just talk about our experiences and have that connection. And then when they do come home, we have connection to people who are going through it too, that maybe we've swapped numbers with and can text and be like, is your guy being a jerk today? All right, cool, mine too. Like, must be the reintegration thing, Just having that community, I think, would be so important.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's where the military's just letting people down. They're letting the family down.
Yeah.
Really, because it's both sides of the equation. So, I had another question I thought of today, and I think this is a perfect time to ask it in here.
Yeah.
What do you think the service member could do to make the job better for a spouse before, during, and after a deployment?
Well, before the deployment, actually give them the paperwork. My husband apparently came home with a stapled packet for your spouse of like numbers to call, resources, all of this, and just assumed that I didn't want it and like put it in the coffee table drawer. And I found it a couple months into deployment. And I was like, well, dude, this would have been nice.
This could have been helpful. Yeah.
So if you get any sort of paperwork for your spouse, just give it to her. Even if you don't think she's going to want it, let her throw it away or hide it in the coffee table, because like there were certain numbers that I wish I had known. It had like my key spouse on it. So I, didn't have to wait for the first text a month in. I could have reached out and been like, man, I'm struggling. Can you connect me with another spouse who's going through this so that I have a friend? There's a lot of different things in that packet that I wish I had known. Would I have taken action on them? I'm not sure, but it would have been nice to have it as an option. So for sure, that's something that I would.
Was it better to have and not need than to need and not have?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And you don't know unless you know. So.
Right. Yeah. You don't know what you don't know. That's for darn sure.
Yeah.
And I mean, he probably thought most of the stuff in there was probably just junk. I'm sure half of it was.
Yeah.
Totally useless. But yeah, that's definitely a good one. So, is there anything during the deployment you think the member can do to make their job easier on the spouse? Obviously, they're gone, so they can't take out the garbage. But
right, something that I struggled with during deployment, as far as communication goes, is that a lot of spouses were able to communicate a lot more with their spouse than I could with Nick. Nick was working nights, so our schedule was kind of flip-flopped. We had about a 3-hour window where we could talk and we were both free. And then on the other side, there were people who were going through day shift over there. And so they would talk and FaceTime and all this fun stuff multiple hours every day. And I was like, how are you doing that? Like, I have a 9-to-5 job. He's working 12-hour shifts. Like, none of us are eating. Like, I don't understand where you're finding this time. And so as far as the spouse goes, I would encourage you not to compare your relationship while you're deployed to anybody else's relationship while they're deployed. As far as what he could do for me that did make me feel good is we missed basically every holiday, both of our birthdays, our anniversary. We missed our all the holiday season. I mean, everything. And so something that was really cool that we have access to now that we probably didn't back when you were, deployed is the internet while you're gone. And so he would just randomly order pizza for dinner for me at dinner time. He knew it was going to be dinner time for me. He knew I probably wasn't going to be eating something fast food or frozen or whatever. And so he just had a pizza delivered to my house. And I remember on our dating anniversary, he had a heart-shaped pizza delivered to my house. I don't know how he did it. I don't know where it came from.
He put it in the notes section on the order. Make this into a heart, please. Here's a $5 tip.
Good, please. Yeah. So it was those little things of just like, you know what? I know we can't go out on a date. We're saving a lot of money by not going out on dates. So I'm just going to send you, order in your favorite meal from the Cheesecake Factory or whatever. And it was really nice because you just feel so appreciated and so thought of, even though you can't talk for hours on end. And so that was a really nice communication tactic that he used, especially if he knew I had a hard day. I would come home and there'd, be food, which is my love language, I think. So that was really nice.
Yeah, that's interesting with the pizza. And yes, we had internet when I was in, but we were closer to dial-up than we were to the internet of today. But
yeah,
that's actually pretty awesome to think about. Literally, I can't remember on the second deployment where I went and got on the internet there, but I know on the first one it was a little trailer, maybe 5 or 6 stations. You had to hardwire in, the old slow computers, but you had to pay, and it was like 20 minutes worth of time. I mean, it was barely enough time to check your email and send a few emails out because everybody's flooding your emails. But definitely a different time. I don't think anybody was ordering pizzas anywhere online back in the mid 2000s like that. I could be wrong.
Probably not.
I'm still the person that picks up the phone and calls. So, so the idea, I mean, it's pretty cool though that, he was able to do that, just log online and I mean, I've ordered pizzas online since then, but it's cool that you can set times and stuff like that. So, for any service members listening on your next deployment, you have no excuse not to send flowers or pizza or chocolates or whatever else you could think of. You know what? You can even order the groceries online.
Yeah, you can DoorDash anything nowadays.
You can DoorDash it to your spouse. You know what? Help her out if she's having a rough week, he or she, and order those groceries on Instacart for them.
Yeah.
Just be careful at the leave at your door thing. You don't want them to leave them there too long because they're either going to end up gone or spoiled. But in all seriousness, like that's actually pretty cool to think about, that you could do that in a couple of days in advance, schedule it, and be done.
Yeah, and even if he couldn't talk for a couple more days, it was just really awesome to just hear the doorbell ring and you knew that it was, food or, something, and you just felt thought of, even though he probably did it a couple hours ago or yesterday or who knows when. It's just really nice to just feel appreciated and, feel loved, even though he can't hug you, he can give you pizza, which is basically the same thing. So
I can't disagree with that. I mean, I love pizza. So it's really cool that he was able to do that. So I really hope other people are doing that. That is definitely a good soundbite, that's a possibility, because you're blowing my mind. I never would have thought about that. So you kind of talked about mental health struggles yourself and for Nick. Yeah. What kind of resources were available for you? Did you find anything in that paper, or did you find something somewhere else?
That's a great question. So originally I didn't know, because I didn't know what PTSD could look like. You see it dramatized. Is that a word? I don't know. You see it on TV.
Don't ask me. I'm going to butcher that. You put me on the spot, I'm going to butcher it.
But you see it on TV, it's these people that are scared because they think that they're in a war zone, and they're huddling under things, or they sneak away and hide in a corner or something, and you see these people just terrified or super angry to the point where they're I'm thinking of like Grey's Anatomy, the main character there, Owen, he chokes his wife, in his sleep because he thinks that the fan above him is a helicopter. Like, you see these crazy things happening. And then your spouse comes home, and Nick came home and he was just angry all the time. And so I honestly took it to heart. I thought he just regretted being married. We'd only been married a month. And so I was like, man, like, I wonder if he just misses being a bachelor, or, maybe I am just too much, And so we'd both been changed that day in January. I think saying our goodbyes to each other, as hard as it was, and as thankful I was the next day when communication was done and he was like, actually, I don't know what happened, but it's gone now and I'm okay. Something happened to both of us that day. For me, I know it resulted in a lot of anxiety. I've gotten a lot better now, but I used to go about my day thinking that myself or Nick were going to die every single day. I'd get into the car and I'd think I was going to die. Nick would leave for work and I would think that he was going to get into a horrific car accident or die on base, or our base was going to get targeted. Like, really crazy things my brain was telling me was going to happen. And I was believing it because I didn't understand what was happening within myself. And I didn't understand why he was angry. I mean, we got into an argument and he threw his phone across the room, not at me, but across the room. And I was just so overwhelmingly upset because I thought he was actually angry at me. But as much as he was angry about what we were arguing over, he wasn't really angry at me. He was angry at the situation and what had happened before. And so it took us a couple months to realize what was happening and realize what we needed. We did utilize Military One Source because I love their platform, but they do have free resources and they have it broken down by what you're going through. So everything from domestic violence to PTSD management to just needing therapy to anxiety. I mean, they break it all down. They even have resources per branch, which I think is really cool. So Air Force versus Coast Guard versus whatever. And so I utilized that right off the bat. Another thing that the Air Force has that I am utilizing is called MFLAC. And it's basically like counseling, but not. So these people are volunteers. They don't take notes, but they will meet you anywhere except your home. So they will go for you on a walk with your dog and you can just vent to them. And they don't take notes. Nothing's written down. Nothing's recorded. Nothing. So you feel so safe venting. And that's what they're there for. They just vent. You can meet them at a Starbucks and get coffee with them and just sit there and vent. And it really just helps you kind of think through things if you're a talker like me. But it's also nice to just know that there's somebody there that can listen, even if they're not there to fix it. Nobody can fix it, but it's just something that you go through. But it did take us a couple months to kind of come to that realization, like, oh, like this is actually signs of anxiety. Like, oh, that's interesting. Like, oh, maybe PTSD doesn't have to be very dramatic outbursts. It can be. I'm sure that it can be, but PTSD can manifest in other ways too. And I think it would have been so important if during those 10 PowerPoint slides, one of them had been on ways that PTSD can manifest in your spouse when they come home.
Oh, absolutely.
Traumatic. So,
I mean, I know I've learned a lot over this little over a year that I've been doing this podcast on PTSD myself personally, talking to other people, conversations I've had here on the podcast, Clubhouse, other places, right? And you kind of hit on something like Grey's Anatomy and choking out a spouse. And I've often said, I really hate how movies and TV portray PTSD as this super angry, violent person who is doing nothing but choking out or punching their spouse, throwing them down the stairs, like the worst possible portrayal of what PTSD is. And what they don't talk about is social isolation. You know, it can lead people to drug and substance abuse issues or angry outbursts, or there's so many different things that people can, and I know myself personally, I got stuck in that view of what PTSD was and denied it for years that I had any. And what I've realized is mine's a little different. I get a little snappy sometimes if somebody snaps my attention away from something and I have to refocus, or self-isolation. I bury myself in work so I don't think about things, and work and volunteer things. And some of it's good, right? I mean, there's good intentions there. I'm helping other people and doing other things, but
Yeah.
it took a long time to realize that what I was doing was kind of because of those things. But another thing you said that was interesting is you felt like maybe he, felt like he wanted to be a bachelor or something because you guys have been married for just a month. Like,
Yeah.
that I could totally see why you would have that thought, but there's also something to the fact that that's a lot of changes too for him to go from dating to married and only a month to figure out what that's like. I've been married for over 11 years now, and the first couple of years, honestly, you're really trying to figure out, you learn a lot about each other. You definitely don't learn it in the first month. And to learn that, and then boom, you're gone. And next thing he knows, he's in a dangerous part of the world doing dangerous stuff. And all he's paying attention to is the men and the women around him and make sure everybody's safe and the mission gets done.
Yeah.
And then to come right back home and pick up that newlywed role after so many months of being gone. I mean, that in itself, even if he had went somewhere safe and been somewhere safe, that's still enough change in somebody's life. Just boom, boom, boom like that. So,
Yeah.
that's something that people have to keep in mind, because I know your situation's not, you're not the only one that's done that. I'm sure there's been other spouses. There will definitely be more spouses in the future that will get married and their service member is going to be deployed weeks later, months later, a year later, and you're still going to be in that honeymoon phase figuring out who you are as a couple.
Yeah.
And it really tests you. But on a bright note, I'm sure that makes you guys a lot stronger too, to so early had to experience that.
Absolutely. Everybody talks about how the first year of marriage is the hardest, right? Because that's when you're combining finances and you're getting to know each other and all that. But we didn't have that. And so, the first year of our marriage was a piece of cake. I mean, I did whatever I wanted to do. He did whatever he wanted to do within his restrictions of deployment. And, we hardly ever fought because we hardly ever talked. And so, the first year of marriage was great. It was probably the best year of marriage we've had so far. It was the second one that was hard, and not because of the pandemic, which happened a month or 2 months before our actual first year anniversary, but because he came home February. May is our official, or June is when we got married. And so we had a couple months of just arguing or whatever. And then it was figuring out how to do finances together and figuring out, okay, now we need a tax person and now we need all these things together, and yay, happy couple go us. But we really didn't know what that meant. And so hearing wife or husband was still unique a year later because we didn't get the chance to say it so much. And so it was a lot of struggling with our own identity and our new mental health issues that we were going through. And it was a lot of trying to figure out who we each were independently and together. And so our second year of marriage was probably the hardest.
That's understandable. Definitely understandable. That had to have been a very weird first anniversary, though. So he was back by your first anniversary.
He was.
That
Yes.
must have been weird when he said happy anniversary to you, to think, and same thing for you to say that in your mind and then realize, has it been a year? Because you weren't here for part of it. That's definitely a strange situation.
Yeah.
But not unique to the military, obviously.
Not at all.
So many people get married young. It's a young person's game. The military is.
Yeah.
So a lot of people go through that. So
Yeah.
I'm glad we're having this conversation, because I certainly hope some military spouses hear this and the members, and they think about that. Especially all the single guys out there. If you plan on proposing anytime soon, think about your deployment cycle.
Seriously.
Listen to this, okay? You got to buy the pizza. Okay, you got to do that when you're. You know what? You might even be able to do it before you leave. Surprise her that first night when you order her pizza, she don't have to cook, or he or she.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but that loneliness that you had that whole time. Luckily, you had some people in your corner, but the loneliness and all those ups and downs leads to a little bit of resiliency and stuff. You know, what if anything were you able to learn from the other spouses that you're able to now pass along to others?
Oh man, everything. So he got back, like I said, in February. And then by September, I was ready to embrace being a military spouse. I didn't know what that meant or what that looked like, but I was like, you know what? I'm just going to do it. I'm going to figure out what it means to be a military community member and then play my part. And, you know, my first kind of thoughts on being a military spouse was things that I'd heard either from my husband or his friends jokingly, like, oh, dependa, thinking of that kind of person. And I was like, well, I have a 9 to 5 job that I'm really proud that I am this leader in my community. And that's kind of the direction I want to keep going. And so I don't know that I want to hang out with those kinds of people. And, you just get all these stigmas again from the media and from TV and movie shows of, just a bunch of people just sitting around, not doing anything, like living their best life on their husband's paycheck. You get that mentality or that mental image of these spouses. And I was like, well, a spouse club sounds horrible. Like I would hate, like, I don't like book club. Why would I want to hang out with a bunch of spouses and just sit around and talk about it? Like, no, thanks. And so I really had no idea about what being a military spouse was like, what the military community was like. And the military has never been this overarching, this is our life is the military. Like we've always done other things. Like Nick loves baseball. He's a huge fan of the Astros and a huge fan of other sports, obviously. And so, for him, he identified as all these other things before he identified as a service member. And I know a lot of people do that. A lot of people don't, and that's okay too. But I knew I needed to find this happy medium. So I decided to interview spouses. And I was just like, you know what? I'm just going to interview spouses on my base, figure out what the heck this community is, what it means, what it does. Like, how do I be a military spouse? Just like fill me in. And then I was like, I'm going to create the handbook that I wish I'd had during deployment. Because if I could just read this handbook, have a section for every month that he's gone, and I would know everything, I'd know all the signs, I'd be able to do everything that I wanted to, then I would have come out of deployment a totally different person, and our relationship would be totally different. So I need to figure this out so I can make a handbook. Well, it turns out that handbook would have been 1,000,001 pages long because you never know enough in the military.
There's a lot of situations that could come up to prepare for.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that would definitely be a long book, and so many different perspectives on what a deployment is, to links and locations, and yeah, that's a difficult one to write.
To bind up. Yeah. How do you bind something like that up? And then all these military spouses I was talking to had such unique, incredible stories. I mean, everything from a corporate job to entrepreneurship to, I just started a podcast and I just talked to people about it. Like, that's my story. And so you just learn so much from each spouse. And so I created this podcast instead of a handbook because it's a heck of a lot easier. And I honestly don't like writing. So I'm not sure I would have
feel you on that one. That is me right there. I don't like writing.
Yeah, exactly. So I created this podcast, and I mean, I just recorded my 92nd interview with a military spouse, and I'm still learning every single day by these spouses, and everybody's story is different. Resiliency looks different on everybody. And, as much as nobody really thinks about it, we've all been touched by mental health in some way. Someone we know has PTSD or has anxiety or has depression. And so feeling so tightly connected to almost 100 now military spouses literally all over the world, people stationed in Germany and the UK and right here in Tucson. It's just overwhelmingly cool to just see how connected we all are, even though we live completely different lives. We all grew up different. We all have different backgrounds. We all are stationed different places or have been in this longer than others. And it's just so cool to realize that even though I was going through deployment alone, I wasn't alone. Nobody's alone in this. And if you feel something or you feel like something's not right, or if your household is dealing with some sort of mental illness, you're not alone in that either. And it's just so empowering to know that other people share your story or parts of your story, and that you can be connected even though you're miles apart.
Absolutely. Yeah, the military community is just so small in some way. I mean, it's millions of people. You know, I read a statistic the other day, just veterans alone, there's like 18 and a half, 19 million veterans, across all generations. But you look at them and their spouses, and it adds up to a lot of people. But active duty specifically, and well, active guard, reserve, right? There's so few people. Such a small percentage of the population is currently serving.
Yeah.
That it's not hard to know somebody, especially longer Nick said, and the more people you interview, you'll probably know somebody before you know it at just about every base there is out there. You'll have a connection everywhere.
Yeah. And it's so cool to see that, or to see that this connection, and this person way over here, they both are going to be PCSing to San Diego around the same time, and that you can connect them and then see them hanging out and see them spending time together. It's just so cool to see how expansive, right? I mean, all over the world, literally all over the globe, but yet how tight our community is and how much we actually do support each other. You get those bad eggs every once in a while, but like just how tight knit and how here they are for each and every person. If I need something, I know I can call in a military spouse, and I know they're going to show up and they're going to bring it. So
you're definitely right about some bad eggs. There are some people out there who have definitely earned the dependent title. I will say, though, we as veterans don't make it easier on the military spouses when it comes to that. It's way too easy for them to make it easy for us to make fun of them.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, doing so kind of paints all military spouses like that, which is totally not fair. Because I remember when I was in, and the people's spouses, what they do, people's spouses in a unit. I know people's spouses that would have definitely fit in that category. And I knew others that, like yourself, have a job, have a mission, have goals in life, and are doing something. And they're not there to collect a paycheck and to collect on TRICARE.
Yeah.
First of all, I don't know why anybody would want to sign. Why anybody would want to be in that community for that medical care. But anyway, it is what it is. So
yeah, I think I heard the term, oh gosh. Okay. So I heard the term dependopotamus before I even knew what dependa meant. And so I was like, well, that ain't going to be me. Like you're like, I'm not even going to identify as a military spouse if that's what it is. Like, no thanks. I'll just be my own person, and I think a lot of people get into that. I get a lot of hate on Instagram. I'll get messages from random spouses who have seen one post where I'm talking about my service member. And it's like, oh, you're that kind of spouse and all this. And I'm like, actually, if you read anything on my platform, you'd realize I'm really not that spouse. But, people get so stuck into this, I don't want to identify as that. Like, oh, we don't talk about the fact that he's in the military, when in fact, you should just celebrate that like you would any other job. I mean, if this community has something so special because we go through something so unique that the rest of the world does not. No other job is going to send you on a deployment where, your service member is going to get rocketed every once in a while and it's no big deal. And yet here we are trying to shy away from the fact that this is just part of our life. And I think instead we should be embracing it, but also embracing us as individuals too. I'm not a dependopotamus. I'm not a dependa, but sometimes I am dependent on my spouse or dependent on something that the military offers, a resource, something like that. And I think it's a balance of both.
I think there's something to be said. I mean, just for as dependent as you are on Nick for certain things, I'm certain there's things he's dependent on you for. I mean, that's the nature of being in love and being married. Like, you are there to lean on each other, to be the support for each other, right? The sickness and health, whatever the vows, some people's vows can be different, I guess, but you are there to be the rock and to be there for that other person.
Yeah.
And in some ways you are dependent on those people. Like, maybe it's just as simple as chores or managing money and things like that. If one person does it, take for instance, if you manage all the money in the household and something were to happen to you, God forbid, then he's got to come in and figure all that stuff out. He has technically been dependent on you for that, or, just as an example. And we need to keep that in mind, that being dependent on something isn't bad, because you can't do everything in the world and you need to delegate things sometimes.
Exactly.
Not everybody you can't put everything on your own shoulders.
Yeah. And it's okay to be both, right? It's okay to be independent, and it's okay to rely on your spouse or other people. It's okay to rely on the base for those really good deals on laptops when you really need a new laptop. Like, there's a reason that these things are in place and a reason that we have access to them. I just think, don't shy away from things just because there's a negative stigma there. Because there's a lot of really cool resources, and Nick's really cool too, I guess. So it's nice to be able to depend on him.
You're not going to let him listen to this episode, are you? You just said he's kind of cool, you guess. Yeah, no, but back to the dependa thing, like, really,
yeah,
because you just said negativity, and I was just thinking something along those lines. It's all on how you frame it. Is it positive dependency or negative dependency? And that's where the dependopotamus and all that stuff comes from, of the stereotypical person, the spouse that lets themselves go, doesn't care about anything, barely takes care of their kids. I mean, doesn't have a job, no direction in life, no goals, nothing, right? Just there. They're soaking up the BAH and the TRICARE.
Yeah.
Not pulling any weight. And unfortunately, some people marry that.
It's true. They do exist.
They definitely exist. So before we wrap up, one final question for you.
Okay.
And you've dropped a lot of nuggets already, so I don't know where you're going to go with this, but what's one piece of advice you think every new military spouse needs to know?
Oh, lean on your community. I think I've kind of touched upon that throughout here, but whether that's a really good resource like MFLAC, if you're Air Force, or whether that's finding a deployment buddy like Effie was for me, I think it's so important to embrace your own military spouse journey, right? You don't have to be a dependopotamus and you don't have to be a dependa all the time, but it's okay to be an independent dependent, and it's okay to be a dependent sometimes. We all have different journeys, and I think you would be starving yourself of something really important if you gave up your own dreams or gave up part of yourself to just fit the mold. So lean on your community in order to get you to experience that uniqueness within you, and that's a part of you. It doesn't have to be entrepreneurship, which is what my platform is really all about. It's just embracing being, your own MEO, but it could be. But it could also be that you want to be a corporate ladder climbing, guru, or someone who specializes or who wants to be a CEO of a really big name company, or maybe you just want to be a banker. And that's okay. It's okay to be whatever it is that you want to be, and just embrace your uniqueness and lean on your community to do that. I think it's just so important.
Awesome. You mentioned your company. Go ahead and tell us a little bit about your company here.
Yeah. So New Altitudes is a business coaching platform.
That there on the screen for everybody.
Perfect. Specifically for military spouses and veterans who are interested in increasing their business online. And really what I focus on is community building online. So building up your Instagram to have a community feel, not increase your follower numbers, though that's great. And we do kind of work on that, but really talking about like how many people are messaging you, how many friends have you made on the platform, how many people do you know purchase from your business multiple times over because they love you and they feel connected to you. That's really what that's about. And then my podcast, Moments with an MEO, is all about interviewing military spouse and veteran entrepreneurs about their entrepreneur and military life journey. And that's always unique. And you can find that basically on any listening platform. So
Awesome. I will have those in the show notes for anybody that's listening. It'll be on YouTube in the description as well. That's new-altitudes.com and Moments with an MEO. Search on your favorite listening platform.
yeah,
Easier way than rattling them all off, right?
I mean, we're on over 20 platforms. So literally any app that you listen to podcasts, we're going to be on it. So.
Yeah, that's kind of what I've gotten to the point on mine too. I'm just like, you know what, wherever you listen to, because it's probably one of the big ones anyway. It's there. Might not be on any little tiny ones, but you know, all the major ones. But I appreciate you coming on. For all the listeners, make sure you go follow Britt, listen to her podcast, contact her if you need it. She's a great resource for things. Like I said, all that stuff will be in the links as well. Don't forget to also hit like and subscribe and follow us on this podcast too if you happen to be listening and not subscribed already. And with that, I got a little ending message here. And Britt, thanks again. I really appreciate you coming on here.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate it.